I am live. Hello and welcome to Act One, a Canadian take on news events. I'm your host, Gordy Canuck, otherwise known as Gordon Causey, and tonight is election night in the riding of Battle River Crowfoot. This is the riding that Pierre Poilievre is contesting to re-enter the House of Commons as the official leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition. It is right now 11:11 p.m. on the 18th day of August, Monday, August 18th, 2025. And apologize for the lateness of the stream. The results were not coming in as quickly. The Elections Canada website had said the results would start to come out slowly uh, shortly after polls closed, and polls closed at 8:30 p.m. in Alberta, 10:30 p.m. my time. Initially, I was going to start at 10:15, but hey, life is busy. I have a dog. And I was a little late getting going, but it didn't really matter because the results were not coming in. Now they are, and Pierre Poilievre is, as should be expected, absolutely romping in the early vote count. So before I get going with the result, I like what Danny has written. Oh, I've got to look after my dog. Well, I have a border collie who has trained me well. Border collies are smart dogs. And Candy the Wonder Dog, this is her, has trained me that at the start of every live video that I do, I have to give her a treat. So without further ado, Candy, shake a paw, lay down, speak, give me a good one, speak. Oh, she's chuffing tonight. Anyway, there is her treat. My dog has been looked after. I have my coffee in hand. Before I really get rolling, you're welcome to like, share, subscribe, all the above, what YouTubers say. Uh, I like what Pierre has, or rather, what Danny has written in the chat box. Go, Pierre, go. My biases should be pretty clear in the description to this video. I fully anticipated that Pierre Poilievre would win this riding handily. The question I had was, would he perform as well as did the previous Damien Currick, who was the individual who held the riding previously? He won it in the April 28th election, and he won over 80% of the vote. I have the numbers available here. He won 82.84% of the vote. And I was wondering, the only question I had was, would Pierre Poilievre achieve that same level? This is a by-election. Let's give you the results so that you can see what's happening. Right now, Pierre Poilievre has 3,085 votes. That's 85.3% of the vote. So he is punching a little bit better than Damien Currick did. However, these results are very early results. There are not many of the polls reporting. This is an insane election, given that there are, I believe, 200 or in excess of 200 candidates listed. Right now, there are 12 out of 286 polls reporting. Anyone who's voted knows that you get your little paper ballot. Normally, you would go and mark an X next to the candidate who you want representing your riding. You fold up the ballot, and then you go to the ballot box and you put it in yourself. Each one of those ballot boxes is a poll. So there are 286 polls or boxes to open, and the votes are then counted. And right now they have counted 12 out of 286 polling boxes. And that represents 4.2% of the total number of polling boxes to be counted. And again, the results, they've just been updated. It's now 3,424 votes for Pierre Poilievre. The next up is an independent candidate named Bonnie Critchley, who I don't know a lot about. However, this Bonnie Critchley, who I'm going to assume is female, because Bonnie, I've never met a guy named Bonnie. And for conservative-minded Canadians, most of us, there are only two genders. So Bonnie Critchley, she has 6.6% of the vote, 265 votes. Next up with all of 3.3 is Darcy Spady, the Liberal, with 134. The New Democratic Party, represented by Catherine Swampy, has 75 votes, 1.9% of the vote. The United Party of Canada, with which I'm not overly familiar, is at 52, 1.3. And rounding things out, we have Jonathan Bridges of the People's Party of Canada, 15 votes, 0.4% of the vote. And then the Christian Heritage Party, represented by Jeff Willerton, he has 9 votes, 0.2. Then the Green Party candidate has 8.2% of the vote. And then there are a few others. There's Libertarian, another independent with 4 votes. The Marijuana Party is represented by Kenneth Kirk. He's got 3 votes, 0.1%. And after that Marijuana Party, there are several candidates, looks to be about a dozen or so individuals, part of this longest ballot protest movement, that have just 1 each. We'll talk a bit about the results. We'll talk a bit about the vote total, but I don't think the result here is in any way, shape, or form is it in doubt. There has been some talk on Twitter, and you've seen the typical Liberal trolls trying to exhort the residents, voters of this Battle River Crowfoot riding to, end Pierre Poilievre's career. The hate on for Pierre Poilievre from the extremist left wing, the radical Antifa type individuals. Pierre Poilievre is public enemy number 1 for some obvious reasons. He did a podcast interview with someone who was liberal friendly, and the attempt by the left to associate Pierre Poilievre with Donald Trump started right from the get-go. They wanted to make Canadian voters believe that Pierre Poilievre was the Canadian version of Donald Trump, and this individual was interviewing Pierre Poilievre and asking him if he was aligned with Trump with respect to gender ideology. Donald Trump has signed an executive order stipulating that in the United States of America that there are only 2 genders. Are you of like mind with Donald Trump? And Pierre Poilievre handled the question well, but I think the podcaster interviewer succeeded in his goal. He wanted to plant the seed in people's mind that Pierre Poilievre and Donald Trump are aligned. And the CBC did it, CTV did it, Global did it. And I tell you, Pierre Poilievre took a lot of heat, criticism for losing that his Carleton riding after Elections Canada had redistricted the riding. They gerrymandered the riding. There's probably, my guesstimate, 25% of the individuals voting for in that most recent Carleton election had never voted in that riding before. They had been added onto it. They do this redistricting in Canada. We call it redistribution. They've done this redistribution of the Ottawa area ridings, and Pierre Poilievre's riding, which he had represented since 2004, was changed mammothly. Mammoth change. It used, when he was first elected, it was known as Nepean Carleton, and then there was some redistricting. It became known as Carleton, and he won the riding 2015, I'm trying to remember all the 2019, 2021, and then the 2025 election. They changed the boundaries of his riding, similar to what is happening in states like Texas right now. They call it, when you support it, you call it redistricting. When it benefits your side. When it doesn't benefit your side, then you call it gerrymandering, playing with the election map. and I'll get more into that. But let's look at the results. Let me share my screen. Share screen, so you can see the results, so you'll know that I'm not speaking out of my nether regions. So let's see, let me make sure that this is sharing, and it is. Let me increase the font size so it's more readable on the live stream. So you should be able to see that now well enough, I think. Scroll it down a bit. So again, we have now Conservative Pierre Poilievre, 3,740 votes, 85.7% of the total. We have Independent Bonnie Critchley is doing better than all the other parties, doubling the support, doubling the number of votes, more than doubling the number of votes of the Liberal Party candidate. I'm going to have to look into this Bonnie Critchley. Who is she? I would imagine that she's likely a prominent local citizen. I do not live myself in Alberta. I'm in rural southeastern Ontario. I live in a place called Northumberland County. If you're wondering who's this guy prattling on about the Canadian election, my name is Gordon Causey. My little internet sobriquet is Gordy Canuck. And I have my little YouTube station. It's not the most dressed up YouTube station you're going to find. It's the most bare bones basic station you're going to come across, probably. No fancy graphics, no fancy lighting. I don't have a professional mic and camera and all that stuff. All I use is a simple laptop. As I say, very bare bones basic. Again, I'm 59 years of age, born 1966. Military veteran, left the Canadian Armed Forces in 2021. Left my last posting was at CFB Trenton, although I am not Air Force, I am Army, or I was Army. But CFB Trenton, of course, is an Air Force base. And I worked in the communications branch, and there was a radar station located off the base that handled traffic for all of North America. Anyway, there, I like this. So we've got someone who has a different point of view, and that's okay. Jason is of the belief that Pierre Poilievre is a fascist. I would wonder, given Pierre Poilievre's support of the Ottawa trucker convoy protest, normally fascists do not support individuals who protest the government. They just shut them down. That's how fascism operates. Fascism is iron-fisted. And Pierre Poilievre was at the federal level one of the most vociferous supporters, and certainly the most prominent supporter of truckers protesting the rights to things like bodily autonomy, which is something fascists don't believe in. Fascists don't think you should have the right to choose what gets injected into your person. The state will keep you safe is the rationale that they use. And I do not consider Pierre Poilievre a fascist at all. I have someone whose name MPB Pop. C'est quoi ça? C'est quoi ça? Ça, c'est mon live stream, là. Mon nom, c'est Gordon Causey, résident de la province de l'Ontario. J'ai 59 ans, ancien membre des forces canadiennes. Pour ce soir, le but de mon live stream, c'est de donner les résultats de l'élection dans la circonscription de Battle River, Crowfoot. And I'm going to stick to English. I was posted to Valcartier from 2011 to 2015. And my French got I can't even speak it anymore. It's tough once you start speaking English to flip back to French. But I speak French reasonably well. Raisonnablement. I can't even say that word anymore. Je débrouille en français pas pire pour une tête carrée. But I prefer to stick in English because that is ma langue maternelle. That is my maternal language. This is the individual hosting your live stream. I see I've got a number of people on, 20 or so. The number's going up and down, up and down. You're welcome to fill the live chat. We're going to talk about the election results right now. Let's see where we are. Pierre Poilievre, 4,000 votes. Independent, Bonnie Critchley. Got to look into her because obviously I would think she must be a prominent citizen. Maybe there's someone watching tonight from Alberta. Maybe someone from this very riding that includes, I think it includes Hinton, Drumheller. It's a very rural area. It is prime conservative territory. And as noted in the 2025 election, the one that was held April 28th, conservative candidate Damien Keurig, he won 82.84% of the vote. So we'll call it 83. And right now, Pierre Poilievre is doing even better than Damien Keurig did. Not monumentally. He's gone from 83 up to just over 85. So he's got a 2-point-something% increase in the popular vote as a percentage. And again, if we scroll to the bottom, there are over either 200 or over 200 names contesting. There are over 200 candidates. It's either 200 on the nose or north of 200. And right now there are 23 out of 286 polls reporting. And again, as I mentioned earlier, a poll, everyone who's voted knows that there are a number of boxes. There's box 81, 82, 83, 84, 85. You'll go to a school gymnasium, a community center, maybe a church, these municipal buildings, and you'll hand your information over, get your ballot, and then after marking your ballot, you then stuff it into a white election box, a ballot box. And if you're in poll 83, you will put it into box 83. So there are 200 and how many? 286 polling boxes that have to be opened and the votes counted. Let's see if there's anything happening on the live stream. Cryptomaria says she nuts. Maybe that's Bonnie Critchley. I don't know. Jason Thompson, I already covered his comment. It said Pierre should have been our prime minister. Carney is evil. That's a commonly held view. I certainly do not believe that Mark Carney has the best interests of Canadians. I think he's more concerned internationally. Mark Carney's primary focus, I'm convinced, is on the globe. He's going to save planet Earth by impoverishing Canadians, by erasing our culture through mass immigration, and lowering the standard of living, lowering the expectations of Canada. He's big on pushing what are called the United Nations SDGs. If you don't know anything about this, look it up. Our former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, his primary focus was on pushing the SDGs. That was kind of his little bailiwick within the UN. It was his job to promote having the world adopt and change to promoting these 17 sustainable development goals. There's this academic notion, and remember, this is an academic notion. And by that, I mean people sit in a classroom in a sterile environment and they make determinations based on things like, models, computer models. And they say, what do we need to do to have a sustainable planet? And well, we have to reduce our carbon footprint. We have to stop spewing carbon into the atmosphere. And Mark Carney is big on this. And hence why the Liberal Party, with Mark Carney acting as their senior advisor when Trudeau was the leader, that's why we have Bill, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it's Bill 69. They basically keep Canada's resources in the ground bill, making it nigh on impossible for infrastructure projects like oil and gas pipelines to move forward, so that Alberta's enormous, goodness knows, hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of dollars in natural resource wealth is stuck in the ground, and that Albertans in particular, but Canadians in general, don't get to reap the benefits, reap the rewards of exploiting our natural resources. Uh, so Danny goes on to say that Pierre should have been our prime minister. Okay, you wrote the same thing. Well, he added in he's destroying Canada. Cryptomeria says, hey, he's busy. Um, Naked men need hugs. He has his priorities. Oh man, it's nasty. The polarization of the political scene in Canada is at levels never seen before. And it's the same thing in the United States. It's the same thing in Western Europe. We're seeing this polarization where each side tends to paint the other side as the living embodiment of evil. If Mark Carney gets elected, Canada will be destroyed. Likewise, the progressive left types, the extremist Antifa type mentality, who don't know the difference between a boy and a girl, a man and a woman, XYXX. They'll say, well, Pierre Poilievre, he'll destroy Canada likewise, because, there are individuals in this country who believe that they have God on their side, and that, if they believe in God, and that, the right of a man to get dressed up in lingerie and dance lasciviously in front of toddlers is a basic human right to them. Incidentally, that's not me. Uh, I recognize the fabric of reality. There are two genders. There's male, female. I was talking earlier about how Pierre Poilievre, they tried to, from the get-go in the election, they wanted to put him basically guilt by association. The CBC, CTV Global, all the mainstream media outlets have tried to demonize Donald J. Trump, and which is an easy thing to do. Donald Trump is an easy guy to hate. He's an easy guy to dislike. And certainly within the context of everything that started happening when he was reelected himself back in November, and took the oath of office January, I guess, of 2025 this year. All the the trade war, I want to make Canada the 51st state, want to erase the border, want to take over Greenland, want to take over Panama. It made Trump very easy to hate. And then by trying to associate Pierre Poilievre, who's as Canadian as the day is long, he didn't leave the country and go to school in places like Harvard or Cambridge. No, Pierre Poilievre earned his academic accreditations at a boring little Canadian university, University of Alberta at Calgary, or University of Calgary. He's Calgarian. He's an Albertan through and through. He only came to Ottawa back in the year 2020 from Alberta. He left Alberta, went to Ottawa to work for what used to be called the Canadian Alliance Party. What before that was called the Reform Party. And then in the 2004 election, after the Canadian Alliance Party and the former Progressive Conservative Party merged under the leadership of Stephen Harper, that is when Pierre Poilievre, early 20s, for the first time ran for election, and he chose to run in a riding, Carleton Nepean, or I think it was called Nepean Carleton at the time, before redistricting. He was going into enemy territory, because typically the ridings in and around Parliament Hill in the Ottawa area, those ridings are liberal fortresses, liberal strongholds. Ottawa area voters like the Liberal Party. They spend like drunken sailors. The CBC can put out misrepresent the news. They can put out misinformation, disinformation, and Mark Carney gives them a raise. And yes, CBC has been caught numerous times spreading misinformation and disinformation, especially during the COVID era. They promoted this idea that if you get the shot, if you roll up your sleeve and get the shot, that you can't get infected with COVID. And then because you're now immunized, because that's what we call vaccinations, immunization, vaccination, they're kind of synonymous. It used to be the old definition of vaccination was a causative substance or agent which confers immunity. And when you're immune to something, you cannot get it. And they promoted this idea that the COVID jabs that they would confer immunity, and that would mean that as a immunized individual, that SARS-CoV-2 couldn't infect me and then mutate and then go and infect someone else. It would stop at me, and they promoted this. And they promoted the narrative about COVID being the deadly coronavirus. And CBC News Edmonton, I've mentioned it many times on this channel. You're welcome to like and subscribe. You can check into this yourself. An Edmonton CBC News outlet went to air with their green screen depicting a patient on a ventilator in an ICU. And yet when eagle-eyed observers of the news noticed it, they noticed that it wasn't a patient. That CBC News Edmonton, our national broadcaster, was showing a picture of a mannequin hooked up to a ventilator, and they did not disclose that fact. They did not engage in ethical journalistic practices by putting forth a misleading image on their green screen backdrop. And proof that it was unethical is the fact that the director of CBC News Edmonton was later forced to issue a public apology. And he said, "We made a mistake. We made a mistake. It was an error in judgment, and I call BS. Was not a mistake. It was not an error in judgment. Everyone knows the sensationalistic fear mongering that goes on. If it bleeds, it leads within mainstream media outlets. They were looking to drive engagement. Nothing drives fear like seeing someone hooked up to a ventilator in an induced coma. But the individual in an induced coma in that case was a mannequin." So Danny has written that Trudeau is a fascist. So is Carney. Certainly, I haven't yet seen the glaring examples of fascist inclination in Carney that I saw in Trudeau. Give the man time. I mean, he's barely been Prime Minister of Canada. He was coronated as leader of the Liberal Party and became Prime Minister back in March when the Liberal Party of Canada held their little dog and pony show coronation to make him the leader. And then the press went into a full-scale love-in. And Mark Carney hopped on a plane and he traveled to see Starmer in Britain and Macron in France, and etc. And he got full media coverage. And if you watch my channel from back at the end of last year, beginning of this year, at late 2024, early 2025, I was warning, I was saying that I saw the potential for a Mark Carney-led Liberal Party to knock the Conservatives down to either a minority or even potentially to win a minority themselves. And with the full court press they did in the media in terms of trying to associate Pierre Poilievre with Donald Trump, they were more successful than I would have liked. And the Carney-led Liberals came very darn close to winning a majority mandate. They fell just shy. I like what, thank you for that. MBC Cup is writing that, "Parle très bien, monsieur." Thank you. I try. Je suis Canadien et de mon avis, qu'on soit vraiment canadien, on est un pays officiellement bilingue. On a 2 langues officielles. Moi, j'habite dans une province, Ontario, avec une langue officielle, l'anglais. Québec, par contre, ça, c'est une province avec une langue officielle français. Il y a juste une province dans tout le Canada où il y a ce que c'est officiellement bilingue. Ça, c'est la province de Nouveau-Brunswick. Mais le pays en total, le Canada, on est un pays officiellement bilingue. Donc, de mon avis, pour soi vraiment canadien, il faut parler nos 2 langues d'un niveau ou l'autre. But I know that the majority of my viewership is Anglophone, and I do speak French reasonably well, but it's not my mother language. So I prefer to stick to English. I have on occasion done French videos, but it's like painting a picture. And with English, my palette has all the colors of the rainbow. Uh, I have so much more to work with. In French, my vocabulary is it's reduced significantly. And so I have to do mental gymnastics to put things across in French. I don't know exactly how to say something, so I rearrange the words. If you're bilingual and an Anglophone like me, I'm Ontario born in Port Colborne, Ontario, 1966. Didn't start learning French until I was in grade 7. Bit of a long story, and you might be interested because who is this guy prattling on about the results in Battle River Crowfoot, the riding that Pierre Poilievre is contesting? When I was 6 months old, my father worked in the financial industry, and he was transferred from. At the time, we were living in Port Colborne. Well, that's where I was born. We were living in Ridgeway, Ontario, Canada, near Crystal Beach, Niagara Falls area. And my dad, his employment, we were transferred down to New York City. And I spent nearly 10 years of my first 12 growing up in the United States in New York City. Spent 6+ years in New Jersey, learning to talk, and then did spend some time, finished grade 4 and did all of grade 5 in Burlington, Ontario, and then we spent a year out in Portland, Oregon. But from the age of 12 forward, we moved back permanently to Canada. No more being a expatriate Canadian living in the United States, being one of the few kids playing hockey in my school. I played hockey in Westwood, New Jersey. That was the only place you could go to play hockey. And then I played in Portland, Oregon. But anyway, that's enough about me. Let's see what's being written. Uh, uh, he's MB Cup's being asked where he's from, and he's saying Quebec. And then he's asking this normal Quebecer conversation. D'où tu viens, toi? Je viens de Quebec. Well, are you talking about Quebec, the city, or Quebec, the province? La ville de Quebec, or where else in Quebec? And Danny, of course, Danny is a Montrealais. He's a Montrealer. And as it turns out, and MB, I can't pronounce his name, MB Cup, just au Québec, nord de Montréal. So he's up in the north part of Montreal. I don't know Montreal's geography that well. I only lived in Quebec City. I lived in Val-Belair, if anyone knows it. Now, Mud Duck Farmer is here, who I've seen before. Always vote for someone new. Old losers, incidentally, just common mistake. Losers has one O. When you write it with 2 O's, it becomes looser. But if it's typo, no worries. But I always like to point that out. Always vote for someone new. Old losers in power forever are hopeless. That's one thing Pierre Poilievre did when he got elected in 2004. Stephen Harper became prime minister sometime 2005, 2006. And so Pierre Poilievre did serve in government. He was a cabinet minister. I believe he was Minister of Industry and some other portfolios when Harper was Prime Minister. But he's never held power as Prime Minister of Canada. And we will see if that's coming in the coming, who knows how long this parliamentary session will last. Normally, under normal circumstances, it's typical for minority parliaments to last anywhere from 18 to 24 months, 1.5 to 2 years. That tends to be the lifespan of a minority government. However, take note, in 2021, Justin Trudeau won a minority parliament, and he pretty much ran out the string. We had almost a full 4 years. Rather than going to the polls, they would have been forced to go to the polls in October of 2025. That's because of our fixed election rules. That would be the hourglass, and the sand in the hourglass would have run out. But Mark Carney made the wise decision for him politically that the more Canadians get to know about Mark Carney, the less there is to like. We find out that he, when as chairman of Brookfield Management, that he sent a letter to the shareholders urging them to get out of Canada and move the head office down to New York, which after he resigned, they approved it. When he decided to vacate Brookfield and become a politician and kind of rescue the globalist enterprise that that I keep wanting to call Justin Trudeau Pierre, because of his dad, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. But anyway, I'm rambling on. Let's see what else is being written. Cryptomeria writes, some of the independents had a few votes. Some of them have 10 cats. They count for 2. Yeah, people are having their coats vote. 200 names on the ballot. We should talk about a bit about that. That's insane. It's this longest ballot protest movement that is upset that Justin Trudeau made a commitment after the 2015 election. Justin Trudeau, in his acceptance speech and his victory speech in 2015, said that this is the last election Canadians will ever have with first past the post voting, or words very close to that effect. He had announced, promised, committed that Canada was going to do away with the system where someone winning 32, 33% of the vote will win a seat in the House of Commons. And conversely, how a party that gains, just 42, 43% of the overall popular vote gets basically 100% of the power. And this is because of our first past the post system, where you do not have to win an absolute majority of the votes. You just have to have the most. You have to be first past the post. And at any rate, so Trudeau, what else is new? Trudeau will have a balanced budget after my first term, out the window. We're going to be open and transparent, out the window. All these commitments that Justin Trudeau made were garbage. He's open and transparent, and then he fired Jody Wilson-Raybould when she wouldn't give his corporate buddies at SNC-Lavalin basically what amounts to a plea bargain agreement in their crime that they were later convicted of. And Trudeau was, in my mind, I can't believe that in Canada, our Prime Minister can actually strong arm the Attorney General and get away with it. And what ultimately happened to Jody Wilson-Raybould is he fired her. If you don't do what I say, you're out the door. You got to give my corporate buddies, guys like, and this is the world that Mark Carney operates in as well. Got to give our friends a cushy deal. It was called a deferred prosecutorial agreement, basically a plea bargain for crimes that SNC-Lavalin was later convicted of, because Jody Wilson-Raybould, acting as our attorney, the top lawyer for the government, our Attorney General, she refused to cave in to pressure coming from Justin Trudeau and the Prime Minister's office. And then, oh, we're getting very French tonight. Cuckoo, cuckoo, everyone. We seem to have new members tonight. Lots of new people showing up. You're welcome to fill the live chat. I'm going to try and keep up as best as I'm able. Let's look at the results. I kind of have it up. Where's the election results? So right now we have Pierre Poilievre at 77,229. And how is that comparing? Damien Kurek won on April 28th with 82.84% of the vote. And Pierre Poilievre is doing a little bit better than what Damien Kurek did. And this is a by-election. And a by-election, you kind of have to take the results somewhat with a grain of salt. There is no way that Pierre Poilievre was going to lose this riding, despite what the liberal trolls say on places like Twitter and Instagram and everywhere else, thinking that this would be the end of Pierre Poilievre's career. If anyone has any questions, I did study political science at university. I went to York. I'm not here to say that I know everything or that I'm, the ultimate expert. But at the same time, I don't want to sell myself short either. And I'm on fairly safe ground. I mean, I talk to a lot of people. I'm a very engaging, outgoing person, and that I talk to people all the time. And I find that my understanding of the Canadian political system is far better than most. So if you have any questions, if I can answer, I will. If I don't know the answer, I'll either try and find it, or I will admit when I don't know something. Anyway, let's read what's being written. We've got Cryptomeria. He's saying that the first party I voted for was the marijuana party when he was 19, and saying no shame. I know a lot of people who have voted for the marijuana party. And thank you. Cryptomeria has dropped a few coins into my super chat box. Much appreciated. You're welcome to do that. But at the same time, I like to stress that please don't feel obligated. I do appreciate it. But at the same time, I know how things are. I mean, life is expensive, and I want my content accessible to everyone. I don't want anyone feeling special. You know, I'm something of an egalitarian. I'm also, I haven't mentioned it yet, not on this live stream. I do it on just about every other live stream. I am a professing Christian. I don't think I fit the mold. I think people have a pejorative negative view. A lot of non-Christians have a pejorative negative biased view about what Christians are like. And I have had people, individuals with whom I work currently, because after I left the military, June of 2021, it was during the COVID era. I'm someone who was not willing to give in to the fascist dictates that said, cede your bodily autonomy and roll up your sleeve and take this product that has no long-term safety profile. We only worked on it for a few months, but go ahead, you can trust us. That's what the Germans used to say in the 1930s. Trust us, good German people. We would not do anything to harm you. We would not do anything negative. We are doing this for your safety. We are doing this for the benefit of the people. This is the way, that's the way that true fascism rolls. We can get into a discussion of fascism versus communism. Either way, whether you're under a fascist system or a communist system, there's a tendency to think of the political spectrum as being linear. I prefer, and this is a common viewpoint, and it's not unique to myself, it's more like a circle. And when you get to the extreme right and the extreme left, although I should probably do that the other way around because it represents differently on the screen. So if you go to the extreme left and the extreme right, they basically meet at the junction of totalitarian dictatorship alley. And so whether you're living under totalitarian dictatorship that is fascist or communist, who cares? Your rights as an individual citizen are gone. I like this individual's name, My Other's Keeper. This type of polarization isn't new. For as long as there's been humans, there's been life and death divisions of opinions. I would disagree with you. Yes, there has always been division. I would agree with you to that degree. But what I'm saying is, over the course of my 50 years, it used to be that liberals and conservatives, that they weren't dominated by the extremes to the degree that they are now. It is the extreme left driving the bus for the liberals. They can't even acknowledge, they stick moronic labels on anyone who dares to challenge any of their ideology, such as, uh, you know, this trans business. Well, if you disagree with it, if you affirm the basic fabric of reality, okay, there are two genders, there's male and there's female. And if a guy subjectively, inwardly feels that, well, I should be a girl based on his inner subjective feelings, well, now the entire world, the entire society, everything has to be flipped upside down to accommodate my inner perception of myself. I've joined the circus, and the rest of the world has to join my circus. And the extremist liberal types, if anyone dares to disagree with this, as I do, they will stick a label on me. And this is what brain dead double IQ types like to do. They like to stick labels on things, and they say, you're transphobic. You suffer from transphobia. You are a transphobe. Well, I know what a phobia is. A phobia is an irrational level of fear. It's extreme, again, irrational. Someone who is hydrophobic gets their pulse rate goes up and they can't function if they're anywhere close to water. I've been around trans people, not often. I live in the sticks, but I used to live in the GTA. I used to live in Durham region. I've lived in Ajax, Pickering, Whitby. I have known trans individuals. I've spoken to trans individuals. And to me, the word is transvestite, not transgender, because transgender, there is no such thing. There is a condition called intersex, very rare. It's like less than 1/10 of 1%, and it's a medical condition. Typically, what happens is in the case of a guy with X and Y, the Y doesn't do its job. The Y chromosome enters the egg, and for whatever reason, it's defective. And so you have a condition, something called Swyer syndrome. I invite you to look it up, Swyer, named after the individual who discovered it. Dr. Swyer discovered this, so they named it after him. Swyer syndrome. And basically, what happens is because the Y chromosome entering the egg is defective, the child before birth, when they're developing in the womb, doesn't develop proper male sexual organs. They're born, and when doctors look at a child, they're not doing genetic testing. The baby comes out of the womb. If there hasn't been an ultrasound before, but it still has to be confirmed, they look down, they look south of the equator, and they say, okay, penis boy, vagina girl. And so they look and they say, hey, okay, it's a girl, because the Y chromosome didn't do its job. And the sad part about Swyer syndrome, and I've read up on this specifically, this one intersex medical condition, is that it's often not identified until the individual is supposed to go through puberty. And so you've had a child who's been acknowledged as a girl ever since the day she was born, and she gets to 12, 13, 14 years of age, no menstrual cycle comes along. And so it's like, what's going on? Go to the doctor. And that's where it's found out, oh my gosh, you have an incredibly rare genetic condition called Swyer syndrome. You have a Y chromosome, it was defective. Now you have no ovaries, hence why no menstrual cycle. You have no ovaries. And it's important because the ovaries, in place of them, there is fatty tissue, which is quite prone to cancer, quite prone to malignancies. And so what happens is there needs to be a medical intervention. Perhaps, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I would imagine that fatty tissue might be removed through some surgical procedure to preclude the tissue from turning malignant, becoming cancerous, and threatening the individual's life. That's intersex. That's a completely removed from individuals, from a guy saying, I feel like I should be a woman. And so, I want to go into the locker room. I want to shower with girls. I want to use female restrooms because the world has to acknowledge the way I see myself. And that's nuts. I mean, what am I going to start to identify as 6'8"? I'm just shy of 6 feet. I'm 5'11" and a bit. When I put my shoes on, I'm 6 foot tall. But can I identify now as 7 foot and say that you have to give me a job in the NBA, and that, or when you're talking to me, you have to crouch down so that you affirm my height identity? This whole thing is nuts. Anyway, I want to get through some of the comments. Got quite a few new people here. Greg Howell. I don't think I've seen that. I don't think I've seen your name before, Greg. He's writing, who watched Bonnie at the debate and walked away thinking she would definitely get a lot done in Ottawa? Ridiculous, she has reached double digits in votes. Unfortunately, the reality is, in my riding in the election that just passed, we had an independent candidate. I went to the all candidates meeting. She's a very well-known local area personality, very well-spoken, very articulate, does not want to be beholden to the political machine. And so she ran as an independent. She did reasonably well. I forget her name, but it's an unfortunate reality in Canada that if you want to affect any real meaningful change, you pretty much have to attach yourself to one of the established political parties. You're going to either have to become, and there are only two parties have ever governed this country, the Liberals and the Conservatives. The Conservative Party, they were the Conservative Party of Canada first, with Sir John A. Macdonald as their first prime minister. And then I forget exactly when, whether it was in the 60s or 70s, they changed the name from Conservative Party of Canada, and they became the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada, which is somewhat oxymoronic. Progressive conservative, jumbo shrimp. Are you progressive, conservative? Progressive, conservative. And a lot of people like the label progressive. Oh, I'm progressive, progressive. I'm moving forward. I'm moving, I'm evolving. I'm making progression. Progression is a positive sounding word, but I'm here to say that you can progress towards disaster. You can progress toward the edge of a cliff. You can progress toward the brink of Niagara Falls. And there are a lot of Canadians, I'm one of them, who thinks that that's what we're progressing towards. Hell in a handbasket is a frequent bromide. We're progressing toward bad times. And so time to put on the brakes, time to right the ship, time to get us steering away from the hurricane that we're sailing into. No, we're progressing straight at it. So, at any rate, how many votes? I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to make a lot of difference. You'll see on the screen now. So, Pierre Poilievre is up to 10,407 votes. He's now punching a little below what Derek Turek, the previous guy, had done. Independent Bonnie Critchley, she's gotten 10% of the vote. And the Liberals are cratering 4.4, just to put some. And I closed the screen without meaning to, but the Liberals are there. Looks to me they were up around 7-8% in the last election. In that election on April 28th in this riding of Battle River Crowfoot. And now they've cratered down to 4.4%. Bonnie Critchley getting 10% of the vote is not insignificant. That takes a lot of work. And so I'm going to be compelled, I'm going to be reading about Bonnie Critchley. Who is she? How did she manage to capture so many votes? She's got 1,310. She's got more than double what the Liberal has gotten, and like 5-6 times the amount of the NDP. And I don't know much about the United Party of Canada. I would imagine it's probably a conservative-minded party, but I don't know. I know that the People's Party of Canada That is kind of the vehicle of Maxime Bernier. So, at any rate, let's see what's being written. Mud Duck is saying, yes, fear sells ads and votes. Yeah. If you can engage with people on an emotional level, you can drive their behavior. This is something of a thesis statement of me, of my channel, that the object of propaganda is to hit a person emotionally, because ultimately, human beings, we are emotional creatures. We like to think that we're sane, rational, that we base our decisions on, facts and data, but ultimately it's fear-based. And that played out in spades during the COVID era, when we saw people lining up to get the shot, and then likewise screaming at anyone who dared to exercise bodily autonomy and say, you know what, I'm going to pass. And that was my initial reaction in December of 2020, when they were first interim authorization was given to the shots, knowing that they had only spent a few months developing this on a platform, mRNA, that they'd been working on for 20 years, 20 odd years. They'd been working on mRNA, this messenger RNA, and it never once yielded one single viable product. No product using the mRNA platform had ever gotten through the clinical trial process. And so I was like, wait a minute, there's never been an mRNA approved vaccine before in human history? Nope, never had one. We could never get one done. And you want me to take the first one that you got through by rushing through the clinical trial process at quote unquote warp speed? Donald Trump's famous warp speed. Anthony Fauci, you want me to take this? A lot of individuals have used the adjective experimental, and I tend toward that. I know that well, it's not experimental. It was developed by the top scientific minds. Da da da. Top scientific minds do experiments, and a lot of people were woefully ignorant of the fact that the placebo group in both Moderna and Pfizer, that it was destroyed. And you can look into that. You can find an NPR, National Public Radio, an American publication that tilts left, like The Guardian. They even did an article on how it makes tracking adverse events difficult because you don't have a placebo group. What basically happened is January of 2021, January, February, early on, what they did is they unblinded the trial. You had, I think in the case of Pfizer, it was about 50,000 individuals who were in the trial, divided roughly equally. 25,000 got the mRNA, 25,000 got a placebo, which, as I understand it, was a saline salt-based solution. They got their placebo, but the protocol for these trials is called double-blind, placebo-controlled. And what double-blind means is that neither the investigators nor the trial participants, the data set, the people, they don't know what they're getting, and those administering the shots don't know. No one knows who's getting the placebo, who's getting the actual mRNA. The way it's managed is they have something, an arm's length group, typically called something like the Data Safety Monitoring Board. And all the shots, all the vials, all the, mRNA and all the placebo, they have lot numbers associated with them. So they say we're injecting clinical trial participant number 186 with lot number 12 or whatever. There's a number associated with it, a lot number, but they don't know whether that is the placebo or the mRNA. And they put it and they throw it into the arm, inject it into the deltoid, and only this Data Safety Monitoring Board, arm's length, knows whether that lot number 12, whether it's mRNA or saline. But then what happened is January, February, very early on, what they did is the Data Safety Monitoring Board unblinded the trial. They let the investigators know, okay, here are the individuals, here are the trial participants who received the placebo, here are the individuals who received the drug, who received the mRNA. And then they turned and the Pfizer's, Moderna's, they went to the placebo recipients and said, you're in the placebo group. Would you like to have the mRNA instead? I'm in placebo. And we're talking about individuals who had signed up for a clinical trial, wanting to advance the cause of science. And I would suspect many of them went into it because they wanted to be first in line for the jab, because they were afraid, they'd been traumatized, they'd been scared to death of the deadly coronavirus. That's the way, it's the way it was framed on every nightly newscast. Dun, 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 dun. More terrifying news from Bobcaygeon, Ontario, as the deadly coronavirus and the tsunami of death at the Pine Ridge nursing home continues to devastate residents. Oh my God, sign me up for the trial. Hopefully I get the drug. And so what they did is they unblinded. They said, would you like to get the mRNA? And the overwhelming majority of them said, yes, give it to me. In the NPR article that I read, there was one particular trial location. There'd be trial locations all over the world with, 300 here, 400 there, 1,000 here, a couple hundred here. I think it was in St. Louis, Missouri. They had around 650 participants. Again, they'd be roughly divided, half placebo, half mRNA. And when they unblinded the trial and said to the placebo recipients, would you like the drug? Would you like the mRNA? Only 2 said no. So it'd probably be 300 plus. And all of them said, give me the mRNA, except for 2. And that destroys the placebo group. Placebo group gone, out the window, destroyed. And then what's the ramification of that? What does that mean? That means that later, a year late down the line, they say, you know what? People are complaining. They say that there's this adverse event, myocarditis. What's the incident of myocarditis in the people receiving the mRNA? Oh, of the, let's say it's, I don't know. I'm just going to pull a number out of my rear end with no, let's say it's 10 out of 100. Okay. What's the incidence of myocarditis in the placebo group? Well, it's too small a number. We can't make a meaningful comparison. Imagine you have 586 cases of myocarditis in the dose group. Well, how many are there in the placebo group? Well, the placebo group is too small. We can't make a meaningful comparison. It's not powered high enough. That's why when you see, that 95% powering, what that means is, there has to be enough trial participants, enough trial years, enough patient years, trial participant years to be able to make meaningful comparisons. Now they can't make meaningful comparisons. And so then what they can say honestly in the media and elsewhere is they say, well, there's no proven link between our product and this adverse event. Oh, you've studied it. Well, we tried to, but we can't because we don't have a placebo group to measure against. I'm going way off topic here. But anyway, Mud Duck, what brought me onto that little rant was Mud Duck had written that here sells ads and votes. Again, we think that we're sane, rational people, but ultimately, we make our decisions based on emotion a lot of the time. A lot of the time. And a reason why a lot of people decided to roll up their sleeve is because they were scared. And a reason that a lot of people were mad at a guy like Pierre Poilievre, who actually, of all the political leaders in Ottawa, he was the most supportive of the Ottawa trucker movement, and people were afraid. They'd been conditioned to be afraid of the truckers. Hong Kong, and they're deemed terrorized. They're occupying. It's an illegal occupation. They're desecrating the statue of Terry Fox. Some of the protesters took pictures. They took a Canadian flag and put it around the statue of Terry Fox that's on Parliament Hill. And the media framed it as a desecration, the CBC, CTV, they desecrated, and that sounds horrible. Well, guess what? During every Pride celebration, well, not every Pride celebration, maybe, but there have been Pride celebrations in Ottawa where members of the Rainbow Coalition crew have gone up to that same statue and equally desecrated it with a rainbow flag. And that is likewise a desecration. If you want to stick to the letter of the if you want to get into the minutia of the detail, expropriating what was Terry Fox's views on LGBTQ, etc. If I'm not mistaken, I think Terry Fox was married, but anyway, everyone likes to take a popular figure, especially one who's dead. Oh, he would have been on our side. Oh no, he would have been on our side. Well, annoying what this country is devolving into. Let's see what Mud Duck Farmer is writing. You die without this, your country. Let me read it here. You die without this, your country fall unless you vote for this person. Oh yeah, that's the rhetoric we hear, and we hear it in the U.S. and we hear it here in Canada. And I have been one who in the past has liked to say that Canada's democracy is strong enough to survive. We've survived Brian Mulroney. We survived Pierre Elliott Trudeau. We survived Brian Mulroney. We survived Stephen Harper. We survived Justin Trudeau. We will survive Mark Carney. That's been a popular thing for me to say in the past. The unfortunate thing is now the way I see the world progressing, when I look at things like the World Economic Forum, their Great Reset, the Agenda 2030, Agenda 2035, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, when I see the self-appointed leaders, global leaders, and the direction in which they're moving us, I see us moving very much into a fascist direction. And to make the distinction between fascism and communism, in fascism, private money still exists. In communism, classic communism, Marxism, the state, the government owns the so-called means of production. Whereas in fascism, companies like a Mercedes-Benz, like Volkswagen, individual corporate ownership is still allowed. So you still have these uber wealthy people, and they are doing the bidding of the government. And when I look at the World Economic Forum, where the world's uber rich, the uber elite go to Davos, Switzerland to plot out the planets, the direction they need the planet to go. They partnered with the United Nations, the World Economic Forum and United Nations partnered in and around the year 2019, just before the COVID stuff hit. And then we have, again, what I mentioned earlier, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And for what it's worth, Pierre Poilievre has stated, getting it back to the election results, Pierre Poilievre had stated during the election that a conservative-led government, which we will not have we're years away from even the possibility of having a Pierre Poilievre conservative government in this country. But Poilievre had made a commitment that if his party won, that his cabinet, that his government members would have no association with the World Economic Forum whatsoever. And we're talking about, the BlackRocks of the world, the Pfizers, the Modernas of the world, the Bill Gates of the world. These are the individuals who descend on Davos, Switzerland every February, meet at their little World Economic Forum conference. This was an organization, World Economic Forum, WEF, founded in the 1970s by Klaus Schwab, whose father was Swiss and had financial dealings with guess who in 1930s Germany. I won't even say the name. I mean, it's similar to the Bush family. The Bush family in the United States, we all know George W. Bush, president from 2000 2008. Then there was also George H.W. Bush, W's father. He was president from 19 1988 to 1992, having served as vice president under Ronald Reagan. And before that, he was director of the CIA. Well, his father was Prescott Bush. And Prescott Bush was on the board of directors with a bank in the 1930s that was engaged in financial dealings with 1930s Germany under the leadership of guess who? And his bank was actually shut down after the United States entered the war for having financial dealings with AH or with that regime. And his bank was shut down, and I have read accounts that say that that was basically the start. After the bank was dissolved and the assets dispersed with the chunk of money that came into Prescott Bush's hands, that was basically the start of the Bush family fortune, and the family moved from there down to Texas. So there we go. A little bit of history all over the place. My other's keeper writes, I like the ethos of elbows up, but otherwise, Poilievre makes 100% the most sense. In politics, you're always going to be forced to put some water in your wine. I saw Pierre Poilievre on a dais he'd been doing when he was running for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. He did an event, and individuals could come up, do the selfie thing, etc. And one individual with his video player going on his cell phone went up to Pierre Poilievre, shook his hand, they did the selfie thing, and then this gentleman asked him what he thought of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which you can look up there. It's mainstream, and even the CBC News reports on it. This is not conspiracy 101, far from it. And Pierre Poilievre played dumb. That's my opinion. Pierre Poilievre said he was not familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, and that was too cute by half for my liking. I found it difficult. I find it impossible to believe that Pierre Poilievre was unaware of them, but I'm willing to give him a pass because I recognize he's a political figure. He needs to get enough votes to get elected, and you don't want to alienate. You don't want to alienate any large demographic group. And so politicians are very careful in the way they frame and the way they talk. As a matter of fact, they don't talk. They don't say anything. The word they use, I'm borrowing this from an old George Carlin routine, but it is so true. There's political speak. And rather than, what did you say to the prime minister? Well, I indicated to him, or as he indicated to me. You didn't say anything, you indicated? And they they never make decisions. We're moving forward on implementing the provisions of our newest initiative, and you have these wiggle words. Well, isn't it true that you said no? I never said that. I indicated, but I never said. And it's an annoying little game. I'm convinced this is why Donald J. Trump is so popular in the United States with a lot of Americans, is because of the fact that he's not running off a teleprompter. He's not engaging in this political doublespeak. Well, you won't hear Trump say, well, as I indicated the other day, or as Bob indicated to me. No, he says straight up, no, I talked to him. I said, Vlad, I said, okay, the war has to end. Okay, that's it. Has to end. Okay, too many people are dying. It's horrible. It's horrible what's happening in Ukraine. Horrible. And, he's very plain talk. And people appreciate that because it sure as heck beats the double speak we hear out of the normal political class. Mud Duck Farmer thinks that something was probably AI. It's hard for me to always keep up on the messages. What's Mud Duck saying? Madison, while they are outdated, not sure. My other's keeper. What's my other's keeper saying? And now I've lost the message. Oh my gosh, there has been so much being written. So my other keeper wrote, I understand your French very well. You were slow enough and simple enough for me to understand with my grade school franglais. I can go faster, but not much. And French is a fun language. It's like English, especially the Quebecois version, because as English, we munch words together. You will never hear an Anglophone that I know say, do you want a cup of coffee? That's not the way we talk. We say, do you want a cup of coffee? Do you want to? And where in the dictionary do you find the word Joanna? But we use it all the time. Do you want to go out? Do you want to? Do you want to? Well, likewise in French, they do the same thing. And the best example I can think of is à cette heure, at this time. But they don't say à cette heure. What they say is à cette heure, la chose qu'on va faire à cette heure, the thing we're going to do at this time. But they don't say à cette heure, at this time. They just munch it all together, à cette heure, the same way that we say Joanna. And that hit home with me the first day I posted into Valcartier when I went on the base, 5e Brigade Mécanisée de Canada. And first day on the job, my sergeant got up on a table and he yelled out, OK, tout le monde, guess what? On avait un changement, la chose qu'on va faire à cette heure. And I'm like, la chose qu'on va faire à cette heure? What the hell is à cette heure? I'd never heard that before. Anyway, thank you, my mother's keeper. And MB Cup is writing that this is pretty inspiring for our outlook as a united country. I would think the biggest problem I have right now, I think I'm detecting a note of sarcasm because we're so polarized, and we are. And online exacerbates that. When you do things like my video online, there's a tendency for people to be triggered because there's no face-to-face, there's no interaction. You don't get the same cues that you get in personal face-to-face interaction. People get triggered. We get pushed into our echo chambers and things devolve. Canadians need to be out talking face to face, need to be doing what happened in Ottawa. I mean, you talk about the divide in Ottawa in February of 2022, when everyone went, well, tens of thousands on the weekends were going down to Ottawa to protest the draconian overreach of our government. Not allowing Canadians to be fully participating members of society unless they bowed down and took a medical intervention without their consent. Basically coercion, which is against the Nuremberg Code. If you do not take the shot, you cannot work. You cannot get on an airplane or a train. You cannot take your kids to hockey. If you want to buy and sell in the marketplace, you have to take the mark. For those who know the Bible and know the book of Revelation, chapter 13, you'll know what I'm referring to when I say, for those who want to buy and sell in the marketplace, for those who want to be fully participating members of society, you have to take the mark. And that's what we had people in Ottawa who went and protested this imposition of this new program that was being foisted on Canadians by Trudeau and his minions, and Jagmeet Singh fully supporting with his NDP, and no backlash. The only one giving some pushback on it was Pierre Poilievre, and he tried to do it in a careful manner because he had to recognize, he's a smart guy, that a good chunk of the population, a large number of voters, have been propagandized into an irrational state of fear. They're afraid they're going to be going to the hospital and being put into an induced coma and hooked up to a ventilator, and they're probably going to die if they catch this little bug. I don't want to make this a COVID video, but that for a lot of Canadians, certainly if you see anyone still wearing a mask in 2025, they're never going to vote Conservative. I mean, if someone is still wearing a diaper on their face, and these, I'm going to go on a bit of an anti-face diaper rant, because one of the units I worked at Valcartier was a medical unit, 5e Ambulance de Campagne, 5th Field Ambulance. And I'm not a medic. I was the radio guy, communications. However, you get trained. You get trained in how to use medical grade PPE, personal protective equipment, things like gloves, masks, gowns. You learn how to use this stuff. And when it comes to masks, simple masking, what you learn, and you can verify this. You can go to the World Health Organization. It's on their website, for goodness sake, that when you put a mask on, you're only to firstly, before you put the mask on, wash, clean, sanitize your hands. Okay, good. Now take the mask, handling it only by the loops, place it over your ears, and then pinch and form as tight a seal as you can around your face. Having done that now, again, wash, clean, sanitize your hands. Good. Bob's your uncle. You're good to go. You're wearing a mask. You're wearing it properly. Now, every time you touch the mask, you're dealing with what is potentially contaminated outer material. Well, every time you touch it, you need to, again, wash, clean, sanitize your hands. We learned this stuff in grade 7 and 8 health class, for goodness sake. It's called cross-contamination, fomite transmission. You've touched the outside of your mask, and now you're touching common touch surfaces, door handles, gas pumps, whatever. All kinds of common touch surfaces out there. And yet, what do you see? These mental midgets still wearing a mask in the summer of 2025 do? They're constantly touching their mask and then touching common touch surfaces. Fortunately for myself, I'm not a germaphobe. And again, I am a Christian. I do not believe in pixie dust that everything came out of nothing. That this wondrous, glorious world, universe that we live in, that this is just the result of random luck, chance, time plus matter plus luck, pixie dust. I don't believe that. I believe in a creator God. I don't want to go too far in that direction. I have done videos on it in the past. I probably will in the future about why I believe that we are created beings. There is just the mind-blowing complexity of the double helix, the two DNA strands. Come on. But regardless, now I've forgotten why I started going to this little tangent. And this is something that happens to me as more and more as I'm getting older. I start moving off in a direction, and I can't find my way back to the point I was trying to make. Um, anyway, I'm just going to leave it there. Someone wants to drag me back, but by the time I get to that message, I'm going to be on to something else. I've got Snoopy, one of my favorite cartoon characters, comic book page, Peanuts, is writing that Pierre is projected to win 75%. Let's take a look. I haven't looked at the results for a little bit. Let's see where we are. 16,670 votes, 80.3. I'm going to share my screen so you all can see it. Let's go to the share button. Share screen. Election night results. See if it's sharing. There it is. So what we're looking at is, come on, 16,670, that's 80.3. The next in line with nearly 10% of the vote, 2005, is an independent, this Bonnie Critchley, whoever she is. The Liberal is sucking canal water with just 872, 4.2. So it looks like, as things stand right now, Pierre Poilievre is marginally below where Derek, and I forget the guy's name. I lost the page. I closed the tab that had Keurig, I think his name was Derek Keurig or something like that, was the individual who resigned his seat in order to give Pierre Poilievre a place to run so that he could re-enter the House of Commons and reassume his role as the leader of His Majesty's official opposition. Well, he had won around 83%, so Pierre's down a little bit from that. But the Liberals in that last election on April 28th, they got somewhere, 7-8%. Now they're down to just 4. They haven't even got 1,000 votes. And You have this longest ballot committee inundating. Look, most of these individuals are not getting any votes at all. So how did they get their name on the ballot? They're not even voting, and you do not have to be a resident of that riding. So this guy at the very bottom, Barry Zukovich. Barry Zukovich, no idea who he is. He's just the last name on the list of candidates. He does not even have to be a resident of the riding, the same way Pierre Poilievre is not. He hasn't lived in Alberta. That's where he was born and raised, but in the year 2000, Pierre Poilievre moved to Ottawa to work for what was then the Canadian Alliance Party. So we have 145 out of 286 polls. And again, to reiterate what I said much earlier, a poll is a box, it's a ballot box. Every riding, every electoral district in Canada is subdivided into little sections called polls. So your street and a couple streets around you may be one poll. And when you go into your school, church, community center, wherever the voting station is, you're handed your ballot, you're told what poll you're in. You might be in poll 85, 86, 87, whatever the number is. And then you put your ballot into the box with that number. If you're poll 85, you put into the ballot box that has number 85 written on it. And so there are 286 ballot boxes that have to be opened and the ballots counted, and they've done so just over half. 52.45% of the ballots have been, of the ballot boxes have been opened, 150 out of the 286 ballot boxes. And normally this election, I think this is the first time ever in Canadian history where this has happened. Normally what happens is you'll have 4, 5, 6, 7 candidates on a ballot. You'll have a Conservative, a Liberal, an NDP, a Green, a PPC. You might have a Christian Heritage Party. You might have Marijuana Party. Usually you'll have 7 or so candidates on a ballot. If you're in Quebec, there's the Bloc Québécois. And the names are printed out. The party affiliation is beside the name, and then there's a circle next to each name. And then you simply put an X with pen or pencil, doesn't matter. You put an X in the circles corresponding to the candidate you want to win, and you stuff it in the box. Bob's your uncle. But now this longest ballot protest group has inundated and registered 200 odd candidates in the riding. So that would mean printing out a ballot that would probably have to have 2 or 3 columns, 60 plus names in 3 columns wide, and you'd have to go searching through to find your candidate. So they changed the system. I think this is the first time ever in Canadian history where the individuals in Battle River, Crowfoot would go into the polling station, they'd get their names crossed off the voter list, they'd be handed a blank ballot, and then they were instructed to go behind the little partition and they were to write in the name of the candidate they wanted as their MP. You want, and if you asked, you could be given a list of all 200 names. But as most people know, I mean, when you're going into an election, typically speaking, the vast majority of people know who they're voting for. They know the candidate. In my riding, I knew I was voting for Philip Lawrence. He is the MP for this riding. I live in a Conservative represented riding. So Snoopy believes it's 75% is the projected. We'll see what it is. I'm thinking it's looking like it might be around 80, but we'll find out. Mud Duck Farmers writing, you don't have 2 elections. And then he's writing, first one decides what 2 is the final election. No, we do not have runoffs. That what you're referring to there, asking, a second election, is a runoff election. A lot of countries do this. What happens is to ensure that whoever is elected gets an absolute majority is, let's say there are 3 candidates and one gets 40%. one gets 35%, and one gets 25%. So no one won a majority of the votes. So in a runoff election scenario, what happens is that individual who got 25%, they're dropped off the ballot. Now there's a second round of voting, and now there are only two names available. So there will only be, someone's going to win 51, 50% plus one, plus one vote. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice. So we do not. I don't know. Where are you, Mud Duck Farmer? Are you in the United States? Are you in Europe? At any rate. And then Mud Duck is going on to say 200 people in one election is hopeless. Well, what was amazing, I mean, Pierre Poilievre came under a lot of scrutiny, took a lot of grief, a lot of criticism over having lost his Carleton area riding, with few people seeming to know that the riding was what the Americans would call redistricted, gerrymandered, what we tend to call rebalanced. They realigned, because I forget the exact number, but each riding in Canada has somewhere in the neighborhood of 125,000 residents. And that's the idea. We want 125,000 or so, maybe it's 150, it's somewhere in that ballpark. People living in the riding. And what happens is demographic trends change and people move out of some areas go down in population, other areas increase. And so every few years they do a realignment. We had 238 seats in our House of Commons going back to 2015, 2019, 2021. And then they redistricted, they changed the lines in certain areas, not everywhere. And Ottawa was one of the areas where they redrew the lines. And Pierre Poilievre's riding suffered significant changes. So he had a lot of people who had never experienced Pierre Poilievre as their MP. And after his support for the Ottawa trucker convoy, there were people living, I have family who live in Ottawa, who were terrified of, it's an illegal occupation. They're protesting. They're protesting for their constitutional and charter rights. Get lost. You live in the capital city. There are protests going on there all the time. And the right to protest, the right, freedom of assembly, these are sacrosanct rights enshrined in our Constitution and our Charter that have to be protected if you want to continue to live in a viable and vibrant a liberal democratic society. And by liberal democratic, I'm using the capital big L, liberal. Liberals believe in free speech. The radicals, who call themselves the progressive left, do not believe in free speech. They want to shout you down, and they'll scream at you. And you can't have a polite, meaningful, mature discussion with these, and I'm going to use a pejorative negative term that'll trigger them, retards. They're frickin' retards. That's what they are. I do not like to swear on my channel. Retardation, retards, that's not a swear. Frickin' is a little pushing the envelope. I prefer not to engage in profanity, not that I'm unfamiliar with it. Again, Canadian Forces veteran. It's de rigueur in the Army. Yeah, 200 people, insane. What else is being written? Sad that a carpetbagger has a place in Canada. Well, that's what we've got with Mark Carney going from, New York, London. Now, hey, I'm going to be Prime Minister of Canada. The media is going to do a full-on love-in for him. Yeah, and but that's where we're at. Telling Brookfield shareholders, or sending a letter to them, urging them to move, Canadian, high-paying Canadian jobs out of Toronto, send them down to New York City, to Donald Trump's old playground. And when he was with Brookfield, likewise, many will know, carpetbagging, taking his investment funds, the investment funds that Brookfield had. What they did is they registered them down in Bermuda. They actually used the address of a bicycle shop in Bermuda, and that was simply to avoid paying Canadian taxes. It's a kind of a Trump-like thing. There's nothing illegal about it. It's like Trump. He avoids his taxes. You know, and Trump famously during that debate with Hillary Clinton said, it's because I'm smart. It's because I'm smart. I know how to play the system. So Mark Carney does. He knows how to play the system. Smart guy. Uh, Not suggesting for a moment that Mark Carney is dumb. He likes to rub elbows at Wimbledon and sip his champagne and his strawberries. That's who we have as our prime minister, unfortunately. What's being written. And yes, tongue in cheek, Karen, or sorry, Kevin, because I'm guessing that you weren't referring to Carney, but the label fits. And then I have Rod Wannemeyer writing, so true. Cadaver Carney should never have been allowed to run. Yeah, just visiting. If he had lost, he would have gone back to New York. He would have gone back to England. His attachment to this country is, shallow. What's being written? Eat me. A BC nurse charged to pay 50K. I think it's closer to 90. There's a nurse in the province of British Columbia. She's appealing the decision, but the professional body that oversees the nursing profession in British Columbia had something of a tribunal with her because she had in her social media accounts expressed a view that I've shared here many times, two genders, men, women, boys, girls, male, female, XX, XY, end of story, full stop. It's what Fred Rogers taught kids growing up when I was, growing up in the 60s and 70s. Only boys can be the daddies. Only girls can be the mommies. It's true. Everybody's fancy, and that's hate speech for a lot of people, for the left-wing lunatic fringe. They consider that hate-filled now. And she had expressed this view that there are two genders, male and female, and that a woman, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, should be allowed to feel safe. And, there should be female-only spaces that are, really female, not pretend female, not I feel like a woman, the old Shania Twain song. I don't want to make this station all about pushing back. I think the vast majority of Canadians and Americans and people in the world recognize there are two genders. Leaving aside very rare and unfortunate cases of intersex like Swire syndrome, which I already went through, that's a medical issue. I'm talking about people with mental health issues and I do not advocate being mean toward them, to be hate-filled toward them. If someone is suffering from gender confusion, especially a child, um, you know, you have to be loving and caring, but being loving and caring means you help that individual come to a recognition of the fabric of reality. It's that old line of what's the difference between neurosis and psychosis. Neurosis is building a sandcastle in the sky. Psychosis is when you move into the sandcastle in the sky. And that's what our society has done. Canada, our federal government, has basically said, okay, you're building a sandcastle in the sky. Well, we're going to allow you to move in because we're going to upend our entire structure of society. We're going to let men go into women's locker rooms, and some women do not. Maybe there are some women who, hey, that's fine. I don't mind. If there's a guy standing next to me, that's her penis, you transphobe. Those are her testicles, you bigot. This world has gone. We're living. I've said it many times, and I'm not the only one. We're living in the upside down. Anyway, so this BC nurse, she advocated for women's only spaces, and this was determined by the governing body of the Nursing Association in BC to be, unprofessional conduct, yada yada yada. They took her to court. They had something of a tribunal. They found her guilty. They forced her to pay. They've ruled that she has to pay their cost. I think it's up $80,000-$90,000, and there are some other penalties placed on her. And this is a nurse who has won professional recognition. She's received awards for the excellence of the care that she has provided. And the good news is she is appealing it. Will she win on the appeal? I don't know. My suspicion, my non-expert opinion, I'm afraid that what's going to happen is she'll take it to the provincial Supreme Court or maybe the Canadian Supreme Court. And what they will do is they will wash their hands so that they'll pull a Pontius Pilate and they'll say, you are subject to the ruling of your governing association. This is not our purview. We do not have jurisdiction in this area. If you want to be a nurse in British Columbia, you have to abide by the structure. That's what my fear is going that would happen. But anyway, what's my other's keeper writing? I'd love to have you on my channel to discuss the Canadian political system and issues. If you go on to my page on YouTube, you'll find my YouTube address, or rather my email address, and you can send me an email and I'll put it down. It's canadiansoapbox@gmail.com. And let's see what Dan is writing. Go Mark Cardley. Oh man, this is going to be interesting. We will see. We will see. Mr. Mr. Mark Carney has already been caught lying so many times. He said that the decision that I had nothing to do with the decision to move Brookfield from Toronto to New York, from Canada to the US. That was done after I left. And conveniently ignoring the fact that he had sent a letter to shareholders prior to his resignation from Brookfield, sent a letter to shareholders urging them to vote in favor of closing down the Canadian head office and moving it down to Donald Trump's old area, the United States, of refusing to disclose, like Trump. Trump wouldn't disclose his tax returns, and Carney wouldn't disclose to Canadians his financial assets. And now we find he's got like 98% of his investments are outside of Canada. What a shock. We all knew this. Carney is in it for Carney, and he's in it for the globalist interests that's who he truly represents. He doesn't represent Canadians. He wants to impoverish Canadians. He wants us to leave our natural resources in the ground. And he's a smart guy. He's doing things in a politically expedient way because what he says is, yes, I'm in favor of large-scale infrastructure developments like pipelines and LNG development, things of that nature. And for these big projects. However, there has to be consensus because he knows consensus is impossible. So it allows him to suck and blow at the same time. Yes, I'm in favor of it, but only if impossible conditions are met. It's like telling, a baseball team, well, I'll pay everyone on the team $100 million a year if you win all 162 games this season. Otherwise, forget it. So I offered to pay them $100 million a year. Yeah, but you said they had to win every single game, 162 games. Well, yeah, but I still offered it to them. I said I was in favor of developing things like Energy East and Northern Gateway, these pipeline deals, these, getting trillions, probably trillions of dollars in Canadian resources to market. I was in favor of it. I just put conditions in place that would make it impossible. So what's being written? My other's keeper's writing, Toronto Star has projected a more than 80% win with only 50 or more than 250 polls in. Let's see where we're at. Okay, 21,000 for Pierre Poilievre. I'll do a quick refresh. 21,472, so he's at 79.3 currently. The big surprise is this independent Bonnie Critchley, who's, more than double the support of the Liberals. Liberals are sucking canal water. Darcy Spady has only got 1,265, can't even beat an independent candidate. And the NDP, 603. United Party of Canada, of which I'm woefully unaware. I should have checked into this beforehand, but big deal. I mean, ultimately 1.8% of the vote is we're in fringe territory, but it's more than the People's Party of Canada. And when you look at the fringest of the fringe, we get down to the Green Party and the Libertarian, 0.3 and 0.2. So People's Party, Green, Libertarian, Christian Heritage Party, likewise, fringe of the fringe. But even the mainstream parties, the Liberals and the NDP, combined, if you put the Liberals and NDP combined, they still couldn't beat an independent candidate. And I wonder if Bonnie Critchley is a conservative. I would imagine she is. I would imagine that my guess, a lot of times what will happen is when a candidate like a Pierre Poilievre is injected into a riding, or Mark Carney was when he was injected into Nepean. Political parties do this, all of them. When that happens, quite often the local riding association, there's an individual quite often who's like, I wanted to be the candidate. They're circumventing the democratic process. I'm going to run as an independent. Happens a lot, but I don't know empirically if that's the case. We got JCP, haven't seen you for a while. Been a while, sorry. Do you have any moderators? No, I do not have any moderators, and it's too late to have them now. I should do that. I should have moderation to clean up the chat a bit and keep it a little more. Anyway, Amy is writing, PP is way too advanced for this to happen. Troll much. We'll see what happens. Mark Carney is new to the political arena. He's used to being a CEO. He's used to being the top dog in the room. He's not used to the political process, and it shows. He's as bad as Trudeau in terms of his oratorical skills, maybe a little better. Trudeau was such a dim bulb, never accomplished anything prior to becoming a politician. Mark Carney had accomplishments. He worked for, I'm trying to remember the name of it now. He worked in the investment banking world. He had Goldman Sachs was where he worked, big multinational American-based firm, big surprise. And he worked there during the time when the seeds of the great financial crisis were planted, when the Goldman Sachs of the world, we had the subprime lending crisis and all the derivative investment vehicles that were invented by the Goldman Sachs of the world. I mean, Mark Carney came from the industry that gave us the great financial crisis. And then when the great financial crisis hit, he became governor of the Bank of Canada. And basically what he was able to do is to try and remedy the problem that had been created by the industry he came from. And what the central banks did was they started printing money. They called it quantitative easing. And there's supposed to be restrictions on the amount of money that the Bank of Canada releases into the marketplace, that you don't want to increase the money supply. It's inflationary, but not according to Mark Carney. Oh, no, it's not inflationary. Farmers in Alberta know it's inflationary. People on the street in Ottawa know it's inflationary. Mark Carney, with his advanced degree in economics, doesn't know. But anyway, the way quantitative easing happened is that governments like Government of Canada issued bonds, and then the Bank of Canada printed new money to buy those bonds. And it injected capital into the markets when there was none back during that 2007-8 great financial crisis that we went through. Anyway, let's see what's being written. David J. Chief is writing, I know it's counter to what you say and believe, but MRI scans show a difference between male and female brains. These differences also show transgender people have brains opposite of physical sex. You know what? The biggest difficulty is you should pick up a book called Lying with Statistics. And quite often, when you have an ideological biased view, you can quite often find data to support it. I fully recognize that when it comes to personality type, there is a spectrum. There is a spectrum. There are men who exhibit what are typically regarded as female type behaviors. And there are likewise women who exhibit what are typically societal wide viewed as very male type behaviors. And when it comes to personality type, that is a spectrum. Absolutely. But that doesn't change the basic fabric of genetic reality, XY, XX, except in those rare cases of intersex. So how personality affects, a brain scan, and we're outside of I am not a neuroscientist. Full disclosure, anyone shocked? No, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I did study science at the university level. I was not in a science program. I was in the humanities, poli-sci. Uh, so, at any rate, and again, I don't mean to be unkind toward individuals, but what we're doing right now is, in the name of care, under the rubric of care, we are prescribing pharmaceutical products with dangerous side effects to prepubescent children to preclude them from going into puberty. And then we're also engaging in radical, mutilating surgeries, hacking off healthy issues and tissue. This is Joseph Mengele style stuff, and we're doing it to children. It's one thing if it's an adult. Hey, if it's an adult, okay. But when we're developing with a child, am I the person 12, 13? I'm at 12, 13 years of age. I know that I was certainly not capable of making, God bless that I had strong parents. Not everyone does. Not everyone does. Some parents are psychopathic, narcissistic to the ultimate, and they just want everyone in the world to think, what a good mother I am, what a good father I am. Look, I'm raising look, I have two transgender children. Aren't I wonderful? Look at me, everyone. That is the mentality that is promoting a lot of this, and I'm going to say it, nonsense. So let's go on. Amy's saying hi. And David Day Chief likes my explanation of intersex, no problem. I do, when I'm curious about something and I want to talk about it with a reasonable degree of intelligence, I study up. So thank you. And that is not to say that I know everything, because I am very much a layman. I'm not, again, I don't have a background in neuroscience, medical science, at any rate. Thank you. And Dan's writing, advance of what whenever possible. Dan's right. I fear no man. The one I fear is God. Christianity is very much under attack these days. And I think under Carney's leadership, we're going to see that attack continue. Look at all the fires. Look at all the arson cases of churches in Canada, and the total lack of ramification, the total lack of justice being brought to bear on those committing those acts. They basically turn a blind eye. No need to investigate. It's too much. We can't, dedicate the time and resources needed to find out who did it. But goodness knows if it was a mosque, well, then it's, virtue signaling again. Sylvie M is writing conspiracy theories about the WEF. Well, it's not conspiracy theory. I mean, to think that moneyed interests would not work together to achieve the ends that they most desire, You'd have to be brain dead stupid to think that wouldn't take place. Conspiracy theory is just a pejorative term put out by double-digit IQ types to try and gaslight people and say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Everyone's a conspiracy theorist. And that's true. It's just a matter of whether your conspiracy theories tilt left or tilt right. And we all conspire. Conspire at its core means to deceive. Two or more people working in concert to engage in a deceptive act. Everyone's engaged in a conspiracy when they've planned a surprise party. We're taking you to, just the two of us going out to dinner. It's just the two of us lying to a husband or a wife and then conspiring to have the restaurant full of friends and family. It's a conspiracy. Some people think that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone with a bolt-action rifle and that he was able to shoot John F. Kennedy. Other people have a little more going on upstairs and can realize it doesn't quite add up. A bolt-action rifle from that distance hitting a moving target? Really? Well, the government told me, and if they say that's what happened, well, that's what must have happened. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. You've obviously also never fired a bolt-action rifle hitting a moving target. And so conspiracies happen. Sylvie's writing, the last Conservative government went to the WEF. Yes, Stephen Harper did. And Donald J. Trump has gone there. And well, actually, he just gave an address to the WEF. He basically spoke to, these wealthy, powerful, influential people. And he basically stuck a finger into the entire Great Reset agenda, Fourth Industrial Revolution. It was gratifying to see. I don't like Trump's personality, but there are some things, recognizing the fabric of reality that we have two genders. Anyway, let's see what else is being written. Dan is writing, they didn't say you couldn't get COVID if you were immunized. Immunizations by its nature gives you resistant to the disease, so the outcomes are not. No, immunization means you do not get it. If you're immune from prosecution, you cannot be prosecuted. If you're immunized, how many people, and they use this word on purpose, MMR, measles, mumps, rubella. I've got that shot. I've got the polio one too. I know nobody, zero. I do not know one single person immunized against measles who ever got the measles. I don't know one single person immunized against polio who ever got polio. And I'm engaging in what they call causational reasoning, which is, correlation does not prove causation, but it can be a strong indication. Nobody I know who's gotten a measles vaccine has gotten the measles. Nobody I know who's gotten a polio vaccine has gotten polio. Pretty much everyone I know who got the COVID shot has gotten COVID. So anyway, to me, it should be, it's now the COVID jabs are better described as a therapeutic then. Well, it's not supposed to immunize, vaccinate, confer immunity. It's not going to do that. It's just going to mean, it's so funny. In February 2022, I got COVID. 99.9% sure. Low grade headache, dry, non-productive cough, aches, muscle joints and aches, running a low grade fever, chills. And that happened on a Friday night. I was on the mend by Saturday. By Sunday, I was pretty much 100%. It was basically a 2-day nothing burger, but I never had the COVID jab. And I'm 99.9% certain it was COVID. I never tested because those tests are horribly inaccurate and useless. But around this time, in February of 2022, there was reporting by medical journals and the like saying that after a COVID infection, conjunctivitis, aka pink eye, is a common rebound. So And I developed pink eye. I got conjunctivitis right after I recovered from this little viral bug I had, this little 2-day nothing burger. And the pink eye was actually more annoying because it started in one eye, went to the other, and then went back into the original eye. And it lasted about 2 weeks. And it was a, a constant stinging, irritating pain, first in one eye, then the other, and then back in the original. And so that to me told me, okay, they're saying it's a common rebound and I got it. Well, okay, probably got COVID. And then a month or two later, I was at a local pizza joint and I saw a gentleman I know, Barry. We used to go to church together. And Barry was outside wearing one of those masks, these medical grade PPE that people treat like fuzzy dice on their rear view mirror. Like people are so brain dead with it's medical grade PPE. It's supposed to be worn and handled in a sterile fashion. And yet you see these mental midgets pulling it out of dirty pockets and stuff like that. Brain dead. But at any rate, so I saw Barry's wearing a mask outside, and I know the man. He's a nice guy, super nice guy. Used to be an auto worker. When you get into heavy duty subjects, Barry hits you with a line that's above my pay grade. He doesn't go too far deep. He's a good-hearted guy. And the news says to wear a mask, so I do what the news says. So at any rate, I said, "Are you okay? You doing all right?" And he goes, "So the mask." He said, "I just got over COVID. Dang, nearly killed me. I thought I was going to die." And he said, "Thank goodness I had the vaccine." And I said, "Yeah, I got it back in February." And he said, "Oh yeah, it was killer, wasn't it?" And I said, "No, for me it was a 2-day nothing burger. Friday night I was chills and stuff, but by Saturday I was mostly better. By Sunday I was right as rain." And he went, "Oh yeah, but that's because you had the vaccine." And I said to him, "No, Barry, I didn't get the vaccine." And his eyes just about shot off the eyebrows just about shot off his forehead. "You didn't get it?" I'm like, "No." And I don't think that I typically come across in day-to-day interaction. People don't think they think I'm part of the compliant, do whatever you're told, listen to the news. If the news says it's got to be true. Uh, I think people have that impression of me, but then when they actually talk to me, they're amazed, they're surprised. They go, "Wait a minute, you didn't go along?" No, I didn't go along. Use my brain. What's Dan writing? Sylvie. Well, I think they're talking about Harper being the featured speaker at the WEF. Yeah. Um, Eat me. Sylvia M. Care to explain why the WEF pushed YouTube videos saying you will own nothing and be happy? That was a branding statement they came out that they quickly abandoned, but there are still echoes of it out there. You will own nothing and be happy because we need to put the world on a path towards sustainable development. There are too many people on the earth. 8 billion can't handle it. The earth can only sustain a population over the long term of just 1.9 billion. And so we need to drastically reduce. We've got to get rid of 80-90% of you useless eaters. That's Boris Johnson's dad's little famous line, calling the majority of the population useless eaters. Go back to Roman times and the poet Juvian, given bread and circuses. Ottawa shown the heroes of humanity in every way. Whale oil beef all the way out in BC. Thank you so much. I agree. Amen, brother. My other's keeper is writing, COVID vaccine is nowhere near the mark. I think it was a trial run. I don't think it was the mark itself, but I think it was a trial run. Want to see how far they could push it. No long-term safety profile. Platform never before yielding an approved product, and we're going to force you. If you want to be in New Brunswick, they, for a short time, tried to prevent those who refuse, like myself, from going into the grocery store, for goodness sake. Well, if you want groceries, you should get it, the brain dead said. Let's see. My other keeper, I occasionally wear a mask when I'm sick so as not to indiscriminately spread my germs. So, my other's keeper, let me ask you, when you wear that mask, if you touch it, do you immediately wash, clean, sanitize your hands? because that is what, if you're wearing medical grade PPE, that's what you're supposed to do. Go to the World Health Organization. They have it. Check out YouTube videos by medical health professionals on the proper handling procedure for donning. They call it donning and doffing, putting on, taking off. And otherwise, you're a vector. You're a spreader of germs because you touch it. It's warm. It's moist. It's an ideal breeding ground for bacteria, germs, all kinds of crap, pathogenic crap. And then you touch things, spreading your germs, fomite transmission. We learned this stuff in grade 7, 8 health class. But the people I see wearing a mask, like I say, they're double-digit IQ types, pulling it out of dirty pockets, touching it constantly. And this is the thing, you touch your face almost reflexively without thinking. It's a subconscious behavior. And here now, you've got a petri dish on your face, for goodness sake, and you're constantly touching it. Well, saying my other's keeper, if you're sick and purely must go out in public, not me. But then again, I believe in there's this conspiracy theory about something called the immune system that I wholeheartedly believe in. MB Cup is writing, seems pretty common in East Asian countries like Japan or China. I know that in China, a lot of people wear masks, especially around Beijing, that it's due to air quality. But I think it's also due to, germophobic type phobia, irrational fear, germs. Oh my God, germs. So, and that happens. There's always a percentage of the population that suffers from that kind of mental state where they're prone to phobic reaction. Like, and yet they try and call me or others such as myself either Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia. I used to do theater. I've been in a dozen plays. Check out Markham Little Theater. You'll find me. I was in Cat in a Hot Tin Roof, Nurse Jane Goes to Hawaii, One for the Road, Oshawa Little Theaters, and Mousetrap. I was in a lot of plays. So you think I'm homophobic? I'm afraid of homosexuals? Hardly. I've been around them plenty. And friends who are homosexual. Transphobia. I'm not afraid of trans people who don't know. And I even knew one individual who was transitioning, an adult man who was transitioning, getting the full Monty done. And whatever. I genuinely thought the guy had some mental issues, but so we all have mental issues to one degree or another. So at any rate, not phobic, but they just love these words. Dan is saying that new abacus data research reveals Canadians have clear expectations for their leaders, and Mark Carney currently aligns more closely with those expectations than Pierre Poilievre. Right now, we're in what I refer to as the honeymoon phase. Government hasn't really done anything, just made promises that it hasn't, like, we're going to build large infrastructure projects. Okay, let's see the result. Trudeau. Justin Trudeau said, I'm going to balance, we're going to run small deficits for the first, 2-3 years, but then we're going to bring the budget back into balance. Never did it. And full disclosure, in 2015, I voted Liberal. I'm not one of these individuals. There are people, both on the left and right, who I always vote Liberal, I always vote Conservative. I'll never vote Liberal, I'll never vote Conservative. I've moved around my voting career. I have voted Liberal, I voted Conservative, I voted NDP. And so in 2015, I was tired of Stephen Harper, and I voted for Trudeau's Liberals. I took him at his word that he was going to run small deficits at the beginning, that he'd restore balance. He never did. And so that was the end of my voting for Justin Trudeau. And then I moved back down the right of the political spectrum, but I couldn't stand Andrew Scheer initially, although I've warmed up a little to him. But I really didn't like Aaron O'Toole, who came in after Scheer. And so in both of the subsequent elections, 2019, 2021, I actually voted PPC. But in the most recent election, I did. I voted Conservative. Dan's writing, very respectful and considerate, something. Why only Mud Duck Farmers writing? Now, every riding in Canada, so this riding that we're looking at right here, Elections Canada, let me go onto the page. Battle River, Crowfoot, that's like in the United States, they would call it a congressional district. We call them electoral districts, or more commonly ridings. And within that riding, there's probably in the neighborhood of population, it's probably a large geographic area, and there's probably in and around 150,000 people living there. And it says, it gives you the number of eligible voters. And then, of course, before I get to the bottom, the page refreshes and I can't seem to get it to stay there. All right, there we go. There are 85,736 registered voters. That's how many people can cast a ballot. So right now, as things stand, with pretty much 85% of the ballot boxes having been opened and counted, we've got close to 40% of the population voting. And this is a by-election. And a lot of people aren't going to bother. And if you live in that area, you know, there's no way that Pierre Poilievre was going to lose. So it's time for me to wrap this video up. I'm gonna just scroll down. I've got Eat Me writing something toward me. Canadian Take on News Events. Thank you. You have an inkling as to who to make the mods, depending on which hour you air. Then again, only the trolls show up during a by-election or a full one. Very true. But if something like this comes up where I suspect I'll have a lot of people, I'll be reaching out to yourself, to Danny, to Whale, to a few of the regulars to moderate if I suspect that I'm going to get hit with 15, 20, 30 people on the live stream. And we got someone trolling us. I'm going to end the video. So let me stop sharing the screen. Let's get rid of that ad that someone put up on my channel. And let's stop this screen share. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed Act 1. That's the way this station is branded. Act 1, a Canadian take on news events. Talk about everything on here. We talked about the wildfire situation yesterday, and yesterday, the day before, and the fact that Nova Scotia is allowing glyphosate to be sprayed onto forest, which exacerbate conditions and fires and makes forest undergrowth more prone, creates more dry tinder. And this is mainstream. You can read it in the CBC News articles. So, province of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, you're not allowed to go walking in the woods, but we can spray the forest so that the conditions for forest fire are enhanced. I talk about everything on this station. Talk about the situation in Israel. Talk about a little bit about Trump, although I have a Canadian focus. I know that a lot of liberals seem to be laser-like focused on the United States and Donald Trump and everything going on down there, as if Canada's the 51st state, but whatever. I think it's part of that virtue signaling mentality. I hate Trump. That makes me a good person. And anyway, appreciate it. I will invite you to fill in the comment field if you're watching this on replay for whatever reason. Give me your thoughts in the comment field. And if you enjoyed the stream, appreciate all the likes and always appreciate subscriptions. Miserable little channel like my own, just an old fart, Canadian military veteran, somewhat unique life experience, but we all have a unique life experience. Putting out his thoughts, his views, his opinions into the public square, trying to elbow my way in to the crowded YouTube space. So if you want to join in on these little discussions, typically this is what happens. My station goes up, then it flatlines, it goes up and it flatlines. I've got around 1,200-ish subscribers right now. Would love to see that go up, but you're welcome to chime in anytime you do. And again, I'm a Christian, and there's a passage in the book of Numbers that I enjoy invoking at the end of my videos. And it's simply a blessing that was spoken by Aaron over God's covenant chosen people. Um, and the blessing is this: it was given to God, to Moses, and Moses then gave it to Aaron. Aaron spoke it over the Israelites, God's covenant chosen people. And the words are these: May the Lord bless and keep you. And Lord God Almighty lift up his countenance upon you and make his face to shine upon you. And may the Lord God, creator of all things, may he grant you peace. And I'm here to tell you that the world's going the way it's going to go. The world is going the way it's going to go. And I'm not going to hate on people who have a differing political viewpoint than my own, because ultimately the world is going to go the way it's going to go. And Christians were exhorted to be of the world, in the world, but not of the world. And if you're looking to get into a relationship with, the maker of all things, the creator of life, then I strongly recommend opening up your Bible, getting into community with a good church, a church that reads from scripture. And I'll be doing a video within a few days, probably, talking about my Christian faith again and talking about why I've had this in my mind for a while, just talking about why I believe the Bible. Why do I believe the book of Genesis? Why, and I'll get into that during that video. So anyway, Eat Me is putting down something that Danny quite often writes down. Danny always writes Jesus is king, but Eat Me is echoing his sentiment and saying, if Danny doesn't say it, God is king. And Whale is saying, indeed. So God bless everyone, and hopefully see some of these people coming back. Be nice. Anyway, take care. End stream. Where are we? There.